I want to say a few words today about sex and compromise, and this is quite an interesting subject. In fact, compromise is an interesting subject in itself, and there are many ways in which we can compromise ourselves, of course, and unfortunately, sex is one of the ways in which we can compromise who we are, and often go off in a direction that we may, at the end of the day, decide wasn't really very good for us after all. So I want to say a few words today under the Safe Relationship Training umbrella about sex and compromise, and to really encourage us to lift the bar as far as our own ability to be able to discern when we ourselves are about to compromise who we are sexually. And how might that happen? How do we compromise ourselves, and why would we want to do that? In fact, it's often the case that we use sex potentially in order to validate our worth and who we are, especially if we have low self-esteem and low confidence. So in other words, if we have very low levels of self-worth and we do not believe ourselves to be worthy of certain things, it is possible to want to gain validation in all sorts of different ways, and therefore to compromise, which means lose a part of ourselves in the process, in order to gain that validation and that sense of self-worth that we so desperately need. And so sometimes we can compromise ourselves without even knowing it, because it may have become a habit, and we may fall into certain situations and behaviours without even being aware of it, because we've done that in the past. And that mindset that we've had of our own feelings of low self-worth, for instance, and therefore that we do not deserve certain things or to behave in a certain way, can result in us compromising ourselves. And as far as sex is concerned, and being on the dating mart or being in a relationship even, we can compromise our sexuality by not valuing it, and also by allowing it to be used in order to gain validation and feelings of self-worth and love and acceptance, because possibly we do not believe that we deserve all those things without having to compromise who we are in the process. And that isn't true at all, because we are worthy as we are, without having to compromise and give parts of ourselves away through various different behaviours and decisions, so that that person will place more value on us, because possibly we do not value ourselves enough to say, no, I'm not going to do that, and I deserve more than that types of behaviour. And sometimes people spot people who will compromise themselves easily, because sometimes people can see who we are on a spiritual level, and they can see sometimes through our behaviour and our communication whether we're going to compromise ourselves or not. And we might not even be aware that people actually target some people who will compromise and who will give away parts of themselves, including their sexuality, in order to gain something in return, they think. But often we lose so much when we compromise who we are, but we do not gain anything in return, because us, our own selves, our own self-worth, and our soul and our being is worth more than anything that we may receive externally. And therefore, when we compromise ourselves, we're actually giving away the most valuable part of us. And that is something that we need to maintain in here when we're in any situation. So, in order to be validated as a woman, for instance, we shouldn't need to turn ourselves into a sex goddess in bed, for instance, in order to be validated and accepted for a relationship. That's not necessary, because a high caliber partner will be looking for someone who isn't compromising themselves and who has strong feelings of self-worth and a strong inner core. And when we are loved by ourselves enough, we know that a high caliber partner will love us authentically for who we are, not for our sexuality. And they will definitely not critique our sexuality in any way, whether it's our appearance, whether it's our sexuality in bed, whether it's any aspect of our personality. A healthy person will not criticize us unnecessarily, especially to manipulate us in order to get more out of us sexually. So no, we don't have to manipulate ourselves in order to be accepted and loved. And so when we compromise ourselves, we often give away parts of ourselves. That means we change who we are in order to be accepted by someone else or by a situation, or even by our families sometimes. Sometimes we make ourselves small so that that other person won't feel threatened by us and therefore will be accepted, we think. But we're giving away parts of our energy system. We're compromising our soul and the essence of who we are. And we don't need to do that, especially in the sexual realm, because our sexuality needs to be honoured by us primarily. And when it is, we will not compromise it sexually, because we know that when we compromise, we lose out. And we may disconnect from that part of ourselves, which is very precious. And someone else needs to honour that as well. So, when we don't compromise, we get into the habit of not compromising ourselves. We empower ourselves. We build up our energy system. And we respect ourselves above all. And we learn to say the most powerful word: no. As always, stay safe and very happy. Bye-bye.